Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced. The best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hello. Welcome back and welcome to the Season 2 finale episode. I am so excited to be saying this, to be getting to the end of a Season 2 of this podcast. I want to just say it's been an amazing journey so far. So excited about the feedback that I've received and that we've gotten from so many people out there that are just enjoying these messages, this support, and these little reminders throughout the week. So super excited just to be here and just to be wrapping up a season two, and also excited about what is yet to come. The end of season 2 has certainly been a wild and strange and scary one with the situation of COVID-19 and the coronavirus hitting as season 2 was coming towards the end. And so I hope that this podcast has helped during these scary and uncertain times, is to help engage your mind and heart during these tough times. I hope whenever you're listening to this, I know that we're still in the midst of all of this and the process continues. So I hope when you're listening to this, you are healthy and safe, and the people that you love are healthy and safe. And hopefully by the time you hear this, that we are moving beyond this as a country and as a world. But for the purpose of this wrap-up Season 2 finale, which over the next few weeks we're actually going to do some special interviews that will come out after the end of Season 2, just some interviews that we'll be gathering just to give people more resources while they are spending so much time in isolation and quarantine in some cases. But I want to take some time to pause and to celebrate Season 2 before then we also do a brief look ahead to Season 3. So for the purpose of this podcast, real quick is I want to help give a little bit of rinse and repeat of where we've been over the course of Season 2. And the reason I'm doing that is because you've heard me say in the past that we all have an effing problem. That's right, I said it. We all have an effing problem. The reality is, our effing problem is that we forget. We forget. So many times we go through an experience, we hear something, we listen to something, we see something, we even say something or do something, and yet we forget the path that we've walked. So the best learning comes when we actually take time to rinse and repeat. And we take the time to rinse and repeat and remember what it is that we hold in our minds and our hearts, so that they can take more a hold, so that we can remember these things, so that they become and they stick within us, within our minds and within our hearts. So with that being the spirit, let's let our minds wander back just for a few minutes over the recap of the journey that we've been on this podcast. Again, if you've been a listener for the long haul of Season 1 and Season 2, then I thank you for being a part of this, and I hope you continue to listen. If you're somebody who's jumped in midstream and only listened to a couple episodes here and then, I really encourage you to go back and to listen to all of Season 1 and certainly all of Season 2. Because Season 2, we followed a pretty exciting and interesting path. And let me just rinse and repeat to capture some of the themes that to bring to your memory, and also probably trigger some of your memory, but also hopefully maybe challenge you to go back and re-listen to something, to hear it again with new ears to a message that's been put out in the past. We started off Season 2 in Episode 1, where I invited all of us at the beginning of January to really commit and to make time for these kind of micro podcasts in our week, to give us some time to feed our minds, to feed our heart, and something to bring some questions and development to each week. So I hope that these have been valuable to you along the way. And I shared the quote with you, or at least the idea, the idea between being versus doing. And I asked the question of who is it that you want to be in this new year? And I encourage you to let your being drive your doing and not the other way around. If you listen to that episode, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, that who is it we want to be is more powerful than just what is it that we're going to do. Let our being drive our doing. And then based on who we want to be in the world, then what are the actions that we're going to put into place? And then what are the things we're going to do afterwards? In episode 2, we talked about, I love this quote, all glory comes from daring to begin. I love that. All glory comes from daring to begin. So what is your vision for the new year? What was that vision? And whenever you're listening to this now, it might be a good exercise for you to look back at what was that vision that you had for yourself or your business or your team for this year. And, what dares will you take? What dares? I encouraged us to think about and remember that daring to begin is not a one-time thing. It's an everyday thing. And so we need to not recklessly, but purposefully make dares. What are those next goals, those next challenges that will help nudge us and the vision that we have for ourselves and for the team and the organization and the people, the mission that we're trying to accomplish, to move that forward. In episode 3, I talked about the fact that culture is our competitive advantage. In the world that we live in right now, we live in a world of choices. And in a world of choices, where you eat, where the information that's instantaneous right in front of us, where we choose to work, where we don't choose to work, all of those in a world of choices, culture is our competitive advantage. And so many teams and organizations are realizing that the culture that they create of not just what they do, but how they do it is what attracts people to them and where people want to work and want to be a part of your culture, and certainly customers and people that you're serving want to be a part of that. And teams and organizations that aren't focused in investing and developing their culture, those are the places where people, in a world of choices, they'll go somewhere else. They'll go somewhere else to work. They'll go somewhere else to find that product or that service. And so culture is our competitive advantage. And I've never been more convinced of this than ever. And certainly, I think this is going to be even more important post-coronavirus, post-COVID-19. The teams and companies and organizations that realize they need to invest in the development of their people and their culture are going to be the cultures. That's going to be their competitive advantage, that they're going to come out of this even more aligned and able to serve the mission and the people that they're trying to serve. In episode 4, we talked about, I had a great interview, an engaging interview with 2 superstars, serial entrepreneur and author of Paper Napkin Wisdom, and my good friend Govind Jayaraman, an entrepreneur and generational researcher and team member Stephanie Jackson. They both shared some powerful thoughts on leading, in the difference in generational differences, leadership, and culture. So if you didn't hear that interview, you're going to want to go check that one out. In episode 5, I talked about the ecosystems of cultures, that on every team and every organization, every group of people on the planet is made up of different species. And I use the example and some great stories and examples from the Galapagos Islands to use that as a metaphor for the cultures that we create in our teams and our organizations. Can you assess your culture? And can you create the ecosystem that you desire? In episode 6, I shared about the powerful words from Brené Brown. Brené Brown, the researcher and the author and speaker, that's just, her words are so wonderful. That she talked about that clear is kind. Clear is kind. And how we communicate. I talked about how we communicate with our teammates, with our colleagues, with our partners, that clear is kind. And so how we communicate and the fact that it doesn't mean that we're soft, but it means that we communicate with the kind of clarity and connected to our mission and purpose. And therefore, when we do it in this way, we're able to have more productive and also tougher conversations. But to be clear with somebody and communicate clearly is actually it actually is kind. And so I hope you'll go back and listen to that episode. In episode 7, I had an inspiring interview with the Chief People Officer from Wendy's, Coley O'Brien. Great person, good friend. I've done a number of keynote speeches for Wendy's and all their leaders from around the world. They have over 250,000 employees in 40 different countries. And think about the challenge and the opportunity and the wonderful elements of developing leaders and culture. And so to talk to Coley about the efforts that they're putting into place and some of the messages that I talked about with their leaders, it was an inspiring interview with Coley. In episode 8, I talked about the fact that language drives behavior. Language drives behavior. And so a common step that we can't forget in the whole culture shaping process is to remember that language helps drive the behavior we want. So I asked us to step back and to think about, so what is the language that we're all using? And is the language, whether that's your mission statement or your vision or the values of not just what you do, but how you do it, are they clear? Are they clear to people? Does it link to action and behavior? Is it compelling? Meaning, does it compel and engage their mind and heart? And is it connected? Is it about connecting people into the work that they do in the world every single day? Because language drives behavior. In episode 9, I introduced, this national and global trend to the way humans are viewing different sporting events and live events. And I talked about the difference between attendance versus engagement. And I put the phrase out there that attendance alone is not good enough anymore. That the trends show us the way that people are moving throughout the world in today's world is that just attending, that people don't want to just attend. In fact, attendance across many different professional sports has been in the decline. And so what we as people want is we don't just want attendance, we want engagement. And so the best leaders, teams, and businesses are engaging the minds and hearts of their people and are getting proactive about how to do that. In episode 10, I had a fascinating interview with former number 1 NBA draft pick, Greg Oden, former Ohio State Buckeye and Portland Trailblazer. I love every conversation that I have with Greg. He's real, he's vulnerable, he's funny, and he's certainly inspiring. So his story and message is one all leaders can't afford to lose sight of. And so many great lessons for all teams. I hope you'll go back and listen to that. In episode 11, if you remember, I talked about the positive mindset and the pulling of energy from negative to positive. And I actually used the image of how a battery works. That is a powerful metaphor for ourselves personally, but also for the teams and organizations and the groups of people that we are with. And this was one of those episodes that was recorded before the outbreak of coronavirus. And yet the themes and the message of this couldn't have been more important when all of a sudden this started to spread and this fear and doubt around the coronavirus. We talked about a message that couldn't be more important. And the best leaders and teams and organizations pull the energy from negative to positive. So go back and check out that metaphor and it'll make more sense to you. In episode 12, I talked about this idea of daredevil leadership. Another example, again, of a pre-recorded message before coronavirus that couldn't have been more important. This idea that we must define what authentic, compelling, and courageous leadership looks like in today's world. And over the last weeks and months, and certainly the months ahead, this is playing out right in front of us, that we don't need leaders that are just about bravado or barking out orders and telling people what to do, and that are recklessly making decisions. We need courageous leaders daredevil leaders that are connected to a mission greater than themselves and willing to care and to serve and to lead and mobilize people together. And we're seeing that play out right in front of our faces these last few months and I know in the months ahead. In episode 13, I talked about courage is sitting in ambiguity, which a powerful reminder to us all when we don't have all the answers, when the future is uncertain to us, when our own thoughts of doubt and fear begin to creep into our minds, to remember that how we navigate ourselves personally and collectively through this is being able to have courage, and remember that courage is being able to sit in times of ambiguity. And in episode 14, I talked about leading change, and I actually used the examples from the early days in the process of COVID-19 and looking at that not as a judgment or who was doing it right and what countries or what leaders were doing it right or doing it wrong, but for us to step back and just look at and be reminded of what is the process that we go through to lead change, to mobilize people. And what is the process that leaders have to think about in order to moving people forward? And that there's an actual process that I talk about, the 6 A's of leading change, that is applies to all leaders, teams, and organizations. And so how do we rally people and lead change in times of crisis, of course, but also, even more importantly, what can be learned and carried forward into the quote-unquote normal or next days that are ahead of us? Because coming out of this, how we lead, how do we develop people, how do we develop culture is never going to be more important. And yet we have to remember there's a process to do that. And in episode 16, I talked about this idea that hungry dogs run not just faster, but with more purpose. Hungry dogs run with more purpose. And what are the attributes of elite performers, athletes, business executives, musicians, community leaders? It's not just about going faster. It's about being rooted in a deeper purpose and passion. So it's been an amazing season 2. I really hope that you dive into and to give those a chance. As always, I hope if there's a message that resonates with you, I hope you'll continue to subscribe to the podcast, of course, but I hope you'll also rate it and review it. That helps us amplify these messages further in the world. And I also hope you'll help share it. So if there's a message that resonates with you, I hope you'll share it with friends and colleagues and team members and people in your life and work so that you can have this common conversation and this common language to have in front of you and to help continue to hopefully help us all develop as leaders and culture. The other thing I was going to do at the end of season 2, like I did at the end of season 1, is to allow some, we always do reflection questions at the end of each episode on the podcast. But at the end of this season, we've also been collecting some questions that have been coming in along the way. And I just want to grab a couple of the questions out of the list and do a little Q&A at the end of season 2. One of the most pertinent questions that came in just recently was, what resources or books would I suggest during this time of quarantine or isolation, certainly with the coronavirus, or even just a time of retreat? What are some things or some resources or books that I would suggest? And so I'll just share with you my own thing. So one of the things, I love college basketball. And so my one tier slowly dropped when March Madness was canceled. So, but one of the things that I do is in times of crisis, but also in other times when I just need to let my brain go in other spaces. So if you have a hobby of some sort, I love college basketball, but there's all kinds of podcasts that I listen to related to college basketball that allow my mind to just go into a space of comfort, of engagement, something that I enjoy and that I love, and to make sure that I'm flexing those muscles in my brain of just things that bring me joy. So whatever that is for you. Some other podcasts I listen to, On Being with Krista Tippett, I think is a great one, especially for this time of reflection. On Being, stepping back, anything out there that's related to your mindset and helping you create habits. I know for myself personally, I've made it a habit of listening to podcasts, of trying to read, to make time for meditation, for walks, for quietness, prayer, whatever that may be for you, a time to just relax and allow my brain to actually embrace this idea of retreat and give myself time to step back and reflect. So some books that I'm currently reading Simon Sinek's new book, Infinite Game, which is fantastic, and I've really enjoyed that. The next one I'm reading is called Stillness is the Key. And that's one that's coming up, which I'm excited to dive into and appropriate for now. Somebody recently actually just sent me a message about my books, and it's caused me to actually think back on my 3 previous books. And it's amazing that when you write something or share something in earlier times, that when crisis arises or when something happens, that the messages, they've always been important, but they seem to have a heightened level of importance. And so I think back about my book, Step Back from the Baggage Claim, and how important that message is right now of being able to step back from all the things that we're trying to claim, step back, to reflect, and to think about more purposely about how do we want to move and what are the things that matter most to us. Then I think about my book, Remember. And in the midst of distractions, that book is about, in the midst of distractions, how do we renew our memberships to the people and the projects and the things that really need our focus. And then lastly, my most recent book, Thermostat Cultures. So proactively, what is the temperature that we want to set with the people around us? And that we're always creating a culture by the way we think, act, and interact every single day. And so creating a culture with the people around us makes us better at what we do. And so all of us are already creating a culture every day by the way we think, act, and interact. But proactively, what is that culture that you want to create tomorrow? And we're all in this together, as we know. So all of those messages from each of my books, they all fit together, but they build off one another. And I hope they're great resources for you along the way. Let's see here. Another question that came in was, do you have a favorite pod episode from season 2 and why? So from my season 2, do I have a favorite pod episode from season 2 and why? Let's see here. Looking back at them, first of all, I'll just say I love all the interviews. What powerful people and examples they are in the world, and great synergy that they have their messages with me and my messages and people who inspire me. These are great examples of people that are working in the world and doing great work with organizations. But, I think back of that interview with my friend Govind Jayaraman and Stephanie Jackson, powerful stuff in that. I think about my interview with Coley O'Brien from Wendy's, Greg Oden, just inspiring stuff. So those those interviews are great. But I really love this micro pod style. And so some of these weekly just nuggets around, I love the positive mindset, the idea of pulling energy from negative to positive. I think especially the amazing timing of the world that we're going through right now. I also love and speak a lot about culture being your competitive advantage. And so that one I really like. And certainly I think the lessons of leading through change, knowing that coming out of this coronavirus scare, every team and organization is going to need to be proactive and thoughtful about the culture that they're creating moving forward. So those lessons that we can learn about the process of leading change are really important. Another question that came in is, how has coronavirus impacted your speaking engagements and business? Oh, another coronavirus question and a great one. So like everyone, every business out there and every person, like everyone, there have been delays, inconveniences, postponements, and a whole lot of ambiguity and uncertainty. There's so many things that are out there, but I'm happy to report, and I'm very grateful and lucky that I haven't had one outright cancellation of a speaking engagement or an event that I was set to do. So not one outright cancellation. They've been just postponements to this point. So, that's such a great reminder to me, and also I'm grateful for that, because obviously that these companies and these events, these organizations, they see great value in these messages in the world, and so they haven't been canceled. They've just been postponed to a time when we can gather together next. So got a lot of great events coming in this fall, and super excited about that. In terms of my longer term clients with companies and organizations where I'm helping to develop leaders and culture and help them proactively lead those culture shaping initiatives and clarity around mission, vision, and values. Right now, we're having to utilize remote and virtual technologies. I'm helping many of those organizations craft messages that will help them engage the minds and hearts of their people and align their mindsets around leadership and culture. And we're getting creative to do that virtually, and to make sure that as people are isolated and spread out, how do we help continue to engage their mind and heart and help bring them a mindset that's going to help them not only navigate their way through the current experience they're having, but help them be prepared for coming out of this. So we're planning for the future, and we know that there are going to be in-person events because once we're able to have those again, those will become, in my opinion, increasingly important to get back on track. Because once we've come out of being in isolation and separated from one another in so many, physical ways, leadership teams are going to need to make sure that they're bringing their people back together, because we need to get people in the same space and to have that kind of, there's power in congregating. And so leadership teams that are aligned around leadership and culture, and they're going to lead their organizations out of this mess that we're in right now better than those who are not. I 100% believe that and know that to be true. So that's how it's impacting my speaking engagements and my business right now is a lot of delays and postponements and inconveniences, but we're also bringing creativity to make sure we're meeting needs and supporting and serving teams now and preparing for what's going to be needed as we come out of this. And the last question, at least, that I'll share with you on this podcast is actually a funny one, or at least the person's saying, give me a funny favorite coronavirus meal, or how did I pass the time activity. I think they're asking, what was my favorite meal while in isolation, or what is an activity of passing the time? Yes, I love this question. So I'll just give you my first thing that came to my mind. Meal, chicken wings. Those of you that know me well know that I love chicken wings. I've taken the opportunity of time to brine and then coat and sauce great wings and grill out wings. My wife and I have loved cooking in general. So taking time and taking advantage of having more time to cook things that take more time. So slow cooking, from scratch, real spaghetti sauce, enchiladas, all of these things just done with more care. So I've loved that. I've also passing time activity. I've done some Nerf gun wars with my kids. We've played out in the front, driveway playing basketball. We've had movie times. We've been, looking at old pictures and old videos, trips down memory lane. We've been playing more games together. So I would never have known that this kind of time was going to come, but we're trying to embrace it the best we can with staying connected to each other, having fun, and enjoying it the best we can. So I want to wrap up this season finale episode. It's been an engaging season 2, and I hope you're ready to dive into season 3. Again, there's going to be some interviews that we're going to put into place in the next few weeks, just while people are in isolation, to be able to give people more content, more things to think about. But know that there's another season 3 coming soon this summer. I hope you return to the past podcasts over this summer and listen to some of the old episodes. I hope you'll share them with others. Again, I hope you'll rate and review, because that helps amplify these messages further into the world. And remember, any of these things that resonate with you in your life and your work and your team and your business, we got to remember to own it. We have to own it. We can't rent it. We got to own it. And so what temperature will you set in the coming days, the coming weeks, and the year ahead. Be that kind of thermostat. Continue to listen, and thank you for listening. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using. And share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to your organization, or you have a question or comment about this podcast, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we all are ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.